The proposal has provisions for personal freedom, business licensing, strong regulation, and taxation. Somebody who wanted to use marijuana in their home could do so. They could not go out and sell marijuana to a minor child. That's illegal. Or to anyone else. No one can just go sell marijuana to another adult or child under the initiative. There's no smoking allowed in public. But business licenses, you would have to go through a very robust licensing process that is very difficult to get, so that would help ensure that the kind of people operating these facilities are responsible and regulated. Legalization and licensing. Adults 21 and older may use, possess, cultivate limited amounts of cannabis. 6 types of businesses: cultivators, processors, testing facilities, secure transporters, retail stores, micro businesses. We modeled this program after what the state legislature passed for medical. We wanted it to be a easy transition from medical to adult use cannabis, and regulated by the same department that is now currently regulating medical marijuana. The initiative legalizes industrial hemp for farmers to grow, requires testing and labeling for consumer protection. I talked about some of the child-proof packaging. And
hey,
we
Robin,
will...
do you want to take some time from Sue, or call her talk now?
I would love for Sue to just pick right up.
All right.
Thank you so much. Let's see if we can switch the slides.
Yep, you can hold down a minute.
Oh yeah, no problem. And while she's getting those, I'm just gonna do a quick intro. So as you mentioned, I'm a primary care physician from Scottsdale, Arizona. So my, I see patients primarily, and also do cannabis research. And one of the things, besides the study that she referenced, the one we're doing an FDA controlled trial looking at different varieties of cannabis in military veterans with PTSD. It took us 7 years to get that study underway, to help it overcome all the regulatory hurdles and get approved. We purchase our cannabis from the federal government and administer it to patients. So I'm observing patients every day in my laboratory who are using cannabis. I'm seeing sort of the good and the bad of cannabis on a daily basis. And I understand the concerns. This is not a plant that is free from side effects. I just want to make that really clear. I don't consider myself pro-cannabis. I'm just pro-science. And it took me many years to come to view cannabis as a medicine. I was very skeptical and anti-cannabis I'm a lifelong Republican. I'd never used cannabis my whole life, and I was really dismissive of a lot of my patient claims that they were getting benefit from this. But slowly, as I started to examine the scientific literature and listen to the stories from these patients, I became quite, persuaded that at least this deserved to be that safe legal access to lab-tested cannabis should be, a basic right, and that that ending prohibition would create an environment that would be more permissive to do the clinical trials that we all so desperately want. In our studies, we look at both safety and efficacy in the same study. So we're trying to examine both. The problem with most of the research that's been done to date is it's primarily all safety studies looking at harmful side effects and addiction potential. We've been allowed to do very little in the way of evaluating efficacy. So if you can go to the next 2 slides, maybe. You'll see in 1936, so you notice that logo there. I'm a representative of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. We started this charity. It's a 501c3 that we launched about 3 years ago to try to create a safe harbor for physicians to talk openly about their views on ending cannabis prohibition, because we felt we were looking at data. There were a lot of online surveys showing that physicians actually, over 60% of physicians in the US believe that cannabis should be fully legalized, not just decriminalized, but legalized for adult use. And so we started to examine this further and got a huge groundswell of physicians coming together under this charity. And so we started to put together some talking points about this. So I wanted to share this with you briefly. I know we're short on time, but the point is that when prohibition of cannabis started in 1937, it occurred over the objections of the AMA, right? The AMA tried to persuade the government that this was a bad idea, that prohibition is a flawed public policy. If you see in the next couple slides, you'll see Dr. Woodward in the next one. It talks about he was a physician who was also the legal counsel for the AMA at that time, and he vigorously objected. You can look at his testimony. I have a reference there where you can read some of his comments. I'm sorry, in the next slide, you'll see the reference to the hearing testimony, and it's pretty compelling to see his arguments. But in the next slide, we talk about 80 years later, the problems with prohibition, the harms that have come from criminalizing this plant. And Robin has raised some of the really important ones. I want to point out one that she didn't reference, which is the fact that synthetic cannabinoids, the synthetic substitutes like K2 and spice that we hear about. I take care of these patients who come into the ER, and it's so depressing to see these guys. This is an outgrowth of prohibition. These toxic chemicals come from making cannabis illegal, because then people create these toxic substitutes that get around the drug testing, and this are extremely dangerous. This is not cannabis. These are chemically derived toxic substances that are extremely dangerous and an outgrowth of prohibition. So let's go to the next one, and you'll see why physicians support legalization of what we a so-called street drug, because we know that cannabis is still relatively benign. I know that that's concerning to say in a group like this, and I agree. I really support the mission of this group. I really applaud you guys for what you're doing. But I feel strongly that cannabis, as someone who observes cannabis being used every day in our lab, that I feel it's far less toxic than most of the prescriptions that I write for patients every day. That it is very well tolerated for the most part by patients, and I feel like that the idea, I wanted to jump to the idea that the racial injustice of prohibition has been on display for us now for decades. The fact that the prohibition has been unfairly or disproportionately attacking our communities of color. On the next slide, you'll see this is a kind of where we stratify the addictive nature of different drugs. And we talk about, you can see there that marijuana is sort of on the same level as caffeine. So a lot of people may flippantly, you'll hear folks in the movement say, oh, you know, cannabis is no more addictive than a cup of coffee. But if you look at the addiction rates of caffeine and cannabis, they are truly similar. It's like 8 to 10% addiction rates in most of the literature, which is a serious problem. I'm not discounting. There is a real issue of cannabis dependence, but it's still far less than all the other much more serious toxic drugs that we have out there. So on the next slide, you'll see we talk about underage use and our concerns about young brains being exposed to cannabis. Of course, we all want to prevent young people from using. We want to prevent pediatric, unintended pediatric exposures. All those things are a huge issue for us. The next slide, you'll see the notion of marijuana as a gateway. I would say I've always been worried about this, but in our study of peer-reviewed scientific literature, what we're seeing is that cannabis is actually more of an exit drug than a gateway to harder drugs. The reason it has traditionally been viewed as a gateway is because we force patients who need safe access to go talk to illegal drug dealers, where then they're exposed to much harder drugs in the black market. But if we could enable a regulated market here in Michigan, which by the way is my home state, I grew up here in Farmington Hills, I care about this community, and I want to see you guys create a regulated market for lab-tested cannabis. And I think that the idea, I would like to show you some of our literature that we're producing with the University of Michigan. We're conducting rigorous surveys where we are examining cannabis as a substitution for opioids and other addictive drugs, and I would really love to be able to share that with you if you're willing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ron. I am the SFL TAP advisor for the state of Michigan. What that means is that we have 45 to 50,000 soldiers that come back through the state every year. Well, we have 45 to 50,000 veterans here in Michigan. And I see anywhere from 7,500 to 10,000 of those veterans each and every year. I am the only TAA in the state. It's very, very tough to reach all the veterans. We do the best job we can with what we have to work with. I am not here as an educated member on this board. These people are much more educated than I am. I gave 27 years of service, and I come back and I look at the experiences that we have. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was when I came back from my last deployment, the Xanax was given to me by the VA doctors for depression, adjustment disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and then the Vicodin for an issue where I had broken my neck back in 2012.
Could you hold the mic a little
doctor,
closer to your mouth?
yeah, sorry. I apologize for that. And as I got into the TAA position, working with veterans in the state, I noticed that the amount of drugs, narcotics, and I think all of us here are against narcotics, and I think nobody's pro-narcotics, especially illegal narcotics. I've always thought it was very intellectually dishonest to call marijuana a Class 1 narcotic, but it is, by law, it is a Class 1 narcotic. But in my experience, all I can tell you is I've watched the soldiers that have come back and have been drugged and drugged and drugged from the Ann Arbor VA, Saginaw VA, Detroit VA, Battle Creek Veterans Homes, and I've seen, I only have this experience. I've lost 16 of my soldiers, not to combat. I've lost 16 of my soldiers to suicide since December 12th of 2011. And several of those, and I can give you their names, Tony, John, Adam, John, Greg, and Brandon. Those are 6 that all died because of opioids. And I've seen other soldiers as they come back, and I've seen them self-medicate, or I've seen them get their card, and I've seen them lead very, very productive lives smoking pot. Let's just call it what it is. It's just, you know, they take a couple of hits before they go to sleep at night, and they get the first good night's sleep that they've had in years. That's my experience with it, is to watch these soldiers thrive, and I've seen guys that have had some very, very serious issues and come back, and it is in my very humble opinion that THC has helped many, many of these veterans, and I've seen so many of them leave the opioid world using THC, CBD oils. And I hurt for these guys. I see them every day. You can walk into any VA clinic and you can just see the ghosts and the shells of the men that were there before. And it is just in my personal experience that I have seen soldiers come back to life through what we call a Class 1 narcotic, and that's THC. So I wish I had more educated literature, and I wish I had more, I wish I had something that, I don't know what I'm trying to say. All I'm trying to say is that in my opinion, in my limited opinion, with the thousands of veterans that I've served with, I've never seen a soldier taking THC or CBD oils that has had issues. Not one, but that's just in my experience. And that's right here in the state of Michigan. So I thank you. I'll cede the rest of my time. That's all I have to say.
All right, you might have a couple minutes left over for the pro side if anybody wants to.
We have a doctor here that we invited, Dr. Laginas, who's a primary care physician locally. He's here in Michigan. If we have 2 minutes, could you get up?
Do we have 2 minutes? Okay, we have 2 minutes. So a little irregular, but we'll.
Yeah.
Sure. So thank you very much. Thanks, Sue, and thanks, everybody. My name is Dr. Litinas. I work in Ann Arbor, and I see patients, and we help them through cannabis. I also do research with the University of Michigan. There are a few things that I would like to say. First of all, thanks for everybody being here. But as far as cannabis is concerned, one thing first. If you look at the science so far, cannabis is extremely safe. Much safer than coffee and opioids and all those things, you know? So it's first very safe. Second, through every day we see patients, they really can be a very effective medication and a very effective tool for patients to become better, you know, to feel better, have quality of life is very important. In my research that we do with the university, our study got published in the Journal of Pain, and what we found, as our patients use cannabis, up to 64% decrease in opioid use and opioid side effects. These are facts, you know. The other thing is that to educate ourselves. The one thing that I found very effective for me is the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. This is a national academy, it's very prestigious, and they did a report. They went throughout the world, they looked at only the highest quality study designs in the highest quality research, and they did a report. And if you Google this, National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, cannabis report, you can read the whole thing for free on the internet. And the things that they found, basically, is that cannabis is very effective for chronic pain, is scientifically proven that it works for patients with chemotherapy, nausea, and vomiting. And I'm not hurting anybody. I should be able to do that, and people in our state should be able to do that. If you, and again, like Sue and everybody else was saying, there is an issue with cannabis. You know, it's not like anything else. You shouldn't smoke and drive, for example. But if you do that and you hurt somebody, there are laws already for that, for driving and hurting somebody. But if I choose in my own privacy of my own home to use cannabis without hurting anybody, not only hurting anybody, but being able to help myself and my pain and my back, and all of a sudden have high quality of life, I think that's an important kind of issue. As far as the medical aspect of it, again, very effective, very safe. It's not without any issues, most definitely. It's not for everybody, but if you educate yourself and use it and utilize it in a way that is very slow and methodical and effective, it can be a very safe substance that is very effective for a lot of issues.
And how many patients can't get into the medical program, and how adult use would enable access?
Yeah, thank you. So right now, over 200,000 patients. I see around 2,000 patients in our clinic per year or so. And this is the one thing that if you ask certain it's a good question. It's just difficult to answer. So there are different conditions, but I see a lot of patients that I ask them, you know, why are you using cannabis? And a lot of times they're using cannabis not necessarily for the condition like just chronic pain. Some patients have anxiety, some patients have depression, or other ways that they use it that are very effective for them and the quality of life that they can have in their community and for themselves. So a lot of these people that don't have those specific conditions are able to use it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And you've heard from the pro side, now we're going to have a con side. And we'll start with Luke.
Wonderful. Yep, right. Thank you. First of all, I want to recognize you for your service. Thank you so much for your service, sir. I want to recognize the other esteemed members of this panel. Thank you for a very respectful, great discussion. I'm Luke Neferatos. I am from Denver, Colorado. I'm a millennial. I am a dad. I'm a former healthcare professional. I lived Colorado legalization firsthand, raised my now almost 2-year-old daughter in it. And you know, I think we've heard a lot of really impactful stories. And you know, stories are really the fabric of how we formulate our decisions, and the folks that it impacts, it really matters. And so for me, legalization impacted me and my family. And I want to share that story with you as well. So, you know, my wife and I, we lived in Northeast Denver, and when we would go for walks in our neighborhood, and we lived in a very nice neighborhood of Denver with lots of families our age, young kids. Every time we went out for a walk, post legalization, with my daughter in her stroller, a cloud of marijuana smoke would cover my daughter in her stroller. And there was one evening we were just walking, and I wasn't working for Sam, I was working in healthcare. My wife turned to me and she said, "You know what? I can't believe this is normal. I can't believe any family has to deal with secondhand smoke covering their kids in their strollers while they're out for a walk in their neighborhood." And that was something that really struck home for me. And it wasn't long after that I went to work for SAM, because I wanted to share my story and the stories of so many others who have lived legalization firsthand to see what happened. Now let's be real here. In Colorado, we learned what legalization is all about. Legalization is about one thing and one thing only. It's about profits. It's about a massive industry. And so let me tell you something. When we voted for legalization of marijuana in Colorado, we thought we were just voting to get people out of prison. And we thought that this was just about kind of, you know what, people shouldn't go to jail for smoking a joint. By the way, I agree. People thought that this was about that. Unfortunately, what we got was something totally not about that. What we got was a massive commercialized industry that now is making billions of dollars. And what they've done is they've started selling limitless potency THC products, up to 99% potency THC products. These sorts of products, there's no research onto the damage that they do on the human mind, because they've only been around since we legalized in Colorado. The research that we have is from the Woodstock days. And in the Woodstock days, the potency was 3 to 5% in a joint. Now we're talking about 99% THC. Now here's the thing. You may be out there and you may say, you know what, Luke, like I don't really care what your experience is. I think legalization is no big deal. Well, let me tell you something, okay? If you're at that point thinking about it that way, I don't know why this is going in and out.
Why don't we just have it?
Thank you. Then let me tell you this, okay? What does it hurt to wait until we get the solid research on what high potency, 99% THC potency does to the human brain? Because we don't know. Now let me tell you this, okay? So this industry has started selling these products. They're using kid-friendly advertisements. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I was just in Denver a few weeks ago. Cookie Monster is being used to sell high-potency THC products in Colorado. Okay? There are kid-friendly ads being used. They are coming in the form of lollipops, candies, brownies, cookies, things that for me as a dad, but honestly, me as a responsible citizen, I don't want that for anybody in the community. I don't want more kids being sold to. But here's the thing, okay? I started 2 companies, as it said in my bio. I would never want to limit myself as a business owner. I want as many people to use my product as possible. That's a for-profit business. That's how it works by definition. For the pot industry, it's no different. They're selling a product. Their product is an addictive drug. That drug needs to be sold to as many people as possible. And guess what? There are now Silicon Valley and Wall Street investors who are the ones that are bankrolling this. So look, the folks over here have shared some very meaningful testimonies about the impacts. And you know what? I don't deny those anecdotes. And I also don't deny the fact that perhaps marijuana has medical uses. And I think by far we should research it. I think that if there are medicinal uses of the components, let's have them. But you know what? That's another conversation. That's medical marijuana. If there are problems with the medical marijuana law, let's fix it. If we don't want people going to jail for smoking a joint in Michigan, let's decriminalize it. We don't have to legalize it. But we don't have to have this false dichotomy. In Colorado, we were sold the false dichotomy. We were sold either you legalize it or people keep going to prison. But what we didn't know at the time, and now thank God I've learned that, and I've learned better policy options, we could do decriminalization. We could just say that, you know what, people are not going to go to jail for having a joint. And then you know what? Folks don't go to jail for smoking marijuana. Problem solved. Now look, here's the thing, okay? We were sold that bill of goods, but what we got was an industry. What we got was Wall Street and Silicon Valley that wanted to make money off of our kids. What we got were kid-friendly advertisements and 99% THC products, okay? Very, very scary. And what were the results? Well, the data is preliminary. So don't let anybody at this table here tell you we have the final answer. We don't have the final answer. We've had legalization for 5 years, and yet everyone here is trying to rush us into legalization. We haven't even seen what the final story is out of these states. In Colorado, I'll tell you though, the preliminary data is very concerning. In Colorado, we've seen a 156% increase in drug driving fatalities as a direct result of marijuana impairment. In Colorado, we have seen youth use rise. In fact, across the country, for kids 12 and up, there are 6,800 new marijuana initiates every day since legalization. It is up significantly over the last decade, okay? In Colorado, what we saw was, the tax revenue promises, it was a drop in the bucket. We ended up with a fraction of a % of our state budget is made up for by pot taxes. Oh, and guess what? The teachers are on strike and have been. Earlier this year, teachers all across Pueblo, a southern town of Colorado, were on strike because there's no pay. So you know what? The money was not what was promised, okay? And here's the other thing. I'm going to go back to my business hat for a second here, okay? If you're a business owner, if I'm a business owner, I told you, invest in my company. I'm making $100 million a year. Oh, that sounds great. But what's the next question you're going to ask? What are the costs to run your business? Let's not talk about revenue without talking about costs, okay? It costs a ton of money to regulate marijuana. It costs a ton of money to handle the property damage, to handle the vehicle damage, the broken lives. How many, here's my question, okay? If we say, oh, only a few families, or only a few people extra die from drug driving deaths, only a few people. Only a few extra families bereft of their loved ones? Is that really what we want, when we could have much smarter policy options such as decriminalization and focusing on science-based medical marijuana research? I mean, there are so many other options here. Why do we have to legalize? That's just the question that I put to you today, and I ask you to consider it, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And here's the thing, okay? Full respect for those of you who may disagree with me, but I think we can all agree that the research is still out. We have so much left to learn. Why not leave it to the states like mine, unfortunately, that chose to be the test beds, that chose to make our people the test tubes, right? And unfortunately, my state has to suffer for that, but at least it can be so that great people in Michigan can learn. Now look, I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I was born there. I was raised in Colorado. Great family, friends. I spent so much of my life in Michigan. I love this state. I don't want to see you make the same state that my state of Colorado made. And I'm here today equipped with firsthand experience as a dad, as a millennial, as somebody who worked in healthcare, the largest healthcare employer in the state. I've worked with over 1,000 physicians. I've met the first 3 physicians or 2 physicians today that I found that thought marijuana was a good idea, to legalize wholesale. So, you know what? There's a lot of different points here. You're going to hear different facts back and forth. And when you hear those different facts, you hear our facts, you hear theirs, and you think, which one's real? That's a great question to ask. Maybe if we're asking which facts are real, we probably shouldn't be moving to wholesale legalize something across our state that we don't even fully understand yet. So I ask you to consider all these things and vote no. Thank you so much.
All right, doctor?
I'm claustrophobic and he smells like shawarma. So, I want to steal something, and flattery is the ultimate form of honor. I, like you, do not consider myself anti-cannabis. I worked for hospice in Michigan on Mack Avenue for 7 years. I gave 100% of my patients in palliative care and hospice full access to medical marijuana. And I showed them how to grind up the damn stuff and put it in coconut oil and backfill capsules. Because nobody should have to ever worry about end of life. And that is where our law took its roots. Like this young man here who looks 12 years old, I think we really do need to fix our medical marijuana law. But I'm going to give you my arguments for where we stand. I consider myself an honest cannabis educator. Next slide, please. And it's true. Nobody is overdosing on cannabis, or at least not the mother's own cannabis. I've been on CNN for 14 years. I've been seen by 400 million people for naloxone advocacy, and it's true that fentanyl and heroin are our demons today. But we have to look at where we're going. Next slide, please. Legalizing medical marijuana was difficult for me to accept, but I chose to move slower and to listen. And I learned from my patients, and I never really trust anybody that writes laws, nothing personal. But I've looked at some of the data, and decriminalization and recreational legalization have left us with an increase in fatal car crash data. Next slide, please. These numbers are small, but these are crash modification factors that show us when we went from prohibition to decriminalization and full legalization. If you notice, and you can't because it's too damn small, Arizona, New Jersey, our ratios are below 1. That's medical cannabis. That's safe because we have gatekeepers. And I don't believe the gatekeepers, I'm not supposed to beat up on the state of Michigan or anything, but they're so overworked and they're so overstressed. I don't know where we're going to get tighter regulations if we go to legalization. Did they do the right thing with pain medicine? Come on, this is terrible. We have things that are out of control. Let's fix what we have, and let's take the opportunity to enforce the right laws and not be rushed into anything. Next slide, please. So our data shows us, based on ratios, that there is an association between change in marijuana laws and fatal car crashes. That is where your cannabis deaths are. They're not in overdoses. They're in impaired driving. Next slide, please. That data was taken from the Journal of Transportation and Health. It's an investigation association between marijuana law change and marijuana-involved fatal crashes. Next slide, please. And one of my friends, and I do have friends across the aisle, some of them I don't get to see as often as I like. Dr. Sicily, do you know Carl Hart from Columbia? Okay. Carl Hart was one of my teachers. Carl Hart has the best dreads in America. Okay? And in my addiction session in 2008 in a Chicago hotel room, Carl taught me to avoid cannabis in certain high-risk groups: cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, schizophrenia, and anybody who's already addicted or dependent on another substance. There is no stronger advocate for cannabis than Carl. But you know why I love Carl? It's not that we're on opposite sides. One of his missions is to figure out how to treat cannabis dependence and cravings when people want to stop. As an addiction doctor, I don't have medication-assisted treatment like methadone or Suboxone or Vivitrol or Antabuse for the other substances, because we need more time for research. Next slide, please. And cannabis has been valuable. The research that I've done has shown me that the 10 milligram cannabis usually runs about a Tylenol 3, and you can ramp it up with the potency. Next. So what we see from Amy Bonnert's studies at the VA, University of Michigan, is that, next, when we combine opioids and cannabis, smoking marijuana, not medical marijuana, but smoking marijuana in a recreational sense, and being on greater than 100 milligram of opiates per day, leads to a higher risk of overdose death. And Amy Bonnert is not a cannabis phobe. She's just trying to look at how do we make vets' lives easier and safer. Next slide, please. Go back one quick, because that's important. You hear this, that it's safer than alcohol. And I would beg to differ that, for me, what I believe to be true is that's wrong. It's different than alcohol. They're both impairing agents. What we see, next slide, is in a study done at Columbia University, when we compared cannabis, alcohol, and cannabis plus alcohol, we had detrimental effects in different higher cognitive and automatic functions. And what I would say is alcohol totally breaks down complex control driving, but you kind of have some automatic skills to take over. And cannabis is the opposite. It breaks down the automatic, and it leaves some more complex positions in place. Next slide, please. And we say here in this billboard, because we are saying, oh, maybe it'll reduce opioid deaths. Next slide, please. In this state, our state data, we've had a law that's made medical marijuana available, and we've gone from 225 opioid deaths to over 1,800 last year, and we've had cannabis for almost 10 years. And the prescribing, this is overdose deaths. Everybody knows that we've only had increase in prescriptions since 2008 when the law first hit. Next slide, please. From the Colorado Department of Public Health, a date before cannabis went recreational and a date after, we see there is at least a double in hospitalizations. Next slide, please. And this is Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. With medical marijuana, we still have 13% people submitting for treatment.
So Dr. Marone, did you
Thank
want
you.
to take a minute of Scott's time, or you
Yes.
gonna let him give us, okay.
I'm turning over to you. Thank you. Sorry about that shawarma thing, buddy.
I don't know which side I'm on.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I mean, obviously, this is a big issue. There's a great turnout here today. Usually when we're out doing community forums, it's tough to get people to a community forum. And to see the turnout here is great. What I'd like to share is this. First of all, I am someone in long-term recovery. I'm someone that works in treatment. I'm also a father of 2 teenage girls, and someone who was recently diagnosed with cancer and has kind of looked at the medical benefits. Unfortunately, we're here talking about recreational marijuana, okay? We're here talking about the commercialization, not the legalization, the commercialization of marijuana. We're living in a 30-year lie right now, right? We have the worst epidemic that our society has ever seen. 30 years of data we have. At best, we have maybe 4 years of data when it comes to marijuana. And I don't want to use the word marijuana. It's THC today. If I say concentrates, do you understand what I'm talking about? How many people do not? Okay, look at the hands. There is a huge generational gap in understanding today's marijuana, okay? I'm 53 years old. I work in the field. If I did it, I'd say, you know, why not legalize it? Because I'm thinking back to the 80s, 90s when I used it. When it was a 2-finger bag, 4-finger bag, nickel bag, dime bag, we had more seeds and stems in the weed, right? You just go up to, okay, just a couple more. The regulation of marketing, it's not going to happen. We're here about, I mean, marijuana today is about creating customers. It's profit over principles. Please, there's no, I mean, what Colorado got and what you're starting to see is not flower, it's not bud, it's concentrates. Already, it has increased 150% in 2 years to roughly 36% of the sale of marijuana in the states like Colorado, Oregon, and Washington are concentrates. These are levels of 80, 90, 100% THC. That's what you're going to get with legalization here in the state, okay? You're going to get unintended consequences, things that you don't understand that you're voting on, okay? Concentrates, like I say, make up almost 30 to 40%. And if you understand, if you have a child and they are adolescent age or teenage, do you know what's going on with vaping? Are you understanding what's going on with vaping? It's an epidemic. It was CDC just announced that it's an epidemic. It has grown so quickly, so fast, that they control policy because of the dollars that they have. People are not going to be smoking marijuana in another 3 to 5 years. They're going to be vaping marijuana. When you take and you look at the sales in the states that have legalized, I mean commercialized, and you look at the concentrates that are being sold, they're being sold as vape products, okay, for the interchanging within the vape apparatuses that you buy. It has grown so big that we have 300,000 storefronts that just sell vape products now. Juul, which is a company, is a $30 billion company already. There is a company that just, if anybody is into the stock market, Tilroy, it's already capitalized larger than Ford Motor Company. Okay? This is what's troubling. So when you look at arrest records, you just go on, do your own research. Go to the Michigan Department of Corrections and look at the number of people incarcerated for marijuana. You'll find it's only 113 people. 111 of them are there for possession, distribution, and 2 are there for possession. And then look at alcohol, 18,000. of the 46,000 people that are incarcerated in our state. Okay? From the standpoint of tax rate, today it just came out, I gave them $250 million the first year. Today they just came out, $130 million is their best that's what pro-marijuana is saying that they're going to collect. $130 million. We collected $26.8 billion in this state last year. We have a lottery, we tax alcohol, we tax tobacco. How are they doing? They cover maybe 8% of the cost to our society. Of that $130 million, it'll plateau in 3 years because of competition and things like that. So you'll get to about maybe $180 million. So they're saying $24 million to the communities that participate, $28 million to the roads, and $28 million to the schools. I'm sorry, $14.7 billion is the operating budget for our schools in this state. $28 million? And you can talk to the school superintendents in Colorado. They're still looking for their money for their schools. Did you go, okay, you know, Dr. Brown always showed this. States that legalized marijuana had 25% fewer opiate-related deaths. You're going to see a lot of this rhetoric. The pro-marijuana people have a lot of money. You're going to start seeing billboards like this. That's absolutely ridiculous. If you look at this, it's 2010, 1999 to 2010. Go forward, Omar. This is from Colorado's health department. They are at the highest level of all drugs of abuse related to death. Opiates is at its highest level ever. Youth use is second in the nation. Okay? Can you go forward? Forward. 1 in 16 becomes addicted. You know, when I go and I debate this, it's always, we're second guessing ourselves. This is a gateway drug. I just heard it's an exit drug. An exit drug for an adolescent? An exit drug for a teenager? I can tell you in treatment what I see 94% of the heroin addicts that are 18 to 25 years old already used marijuana as their first drug of use. 94%. And I can go into the numbers even deeper. But when you're talking about kids growing up, I did 2,000 kids just last spring here locally at a high school. And I started asking, why would somebody want to use drugs or vape? And they start sharing with me, oh, because of the stress. Throw away what you know about addiction and use, because it has nothing to do with use as far as I'm concerned sometimes, when it mostly comes to a child. It's about behavior. It's about the inability to cope. I have an inability to cope, man. When things get dark and rough, I want to escape. I want to use. Our kids are already expressing that to us. And we're going to go legalize. See, when you say Colorado, they're already saying, well, the kids already understand, right? So, you know, the use isn't increasing. Well, what they're not telling you is the data that they're using does not include the 3 largest counties. They didn't participate in the MiFi data. Okay? Also, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. When it comes to the kids, see, there's so much. But you know what I wanna, let's see, what do I want to leave you with? Because I got about 30 seconds, right? Just when it comes to medical marijuana, the worst case scenario, the most conservative way right now, we overproduce medical marijuana. We produce enough for each person that has a card. 300,000 people have a card. 36 pounds per person right now. Okay? Thank you.
All right, now you have heard from the pros and the cons. I want to congratulate you as a jury. You were very well behaved. And each side should have 6 minutes of rebuttal. I'm going slow here so you can think about how to use that time. So you each have 2 minutes. Your team can decide how you want to use it. You can give it all to one person, whatever, but it's your turn.
Thank you. And thank you all for your presentations. One thing that I keep hearing that, especially today, that really bothers me, I mean, I'm a mother of 4 teenagers. None of my teenagers have ever tried marijuana. They've never tried any drugs. I supervise them. I'm a helicopter mom. I think that's my responsibility. But I keep hearing this, decriminalize, don't legalize. And I just want to say I think that is extremely irresponsible from a mother's standpoint, the idea that we would decriminalize marijuana and let people buy it and sell it and get it from the black market and not regulate it and not put it in childproof packages. The whole point of this initiative is to create less harmful scenarios without regulation, without a State Department that is overseeing the regulatory structure and the production of this. We do not have the ability to put it in childproof packages. We would not have the ability to have the sales monitored and tracked through a statewide database. Now, I will agree with you that Colorado made some huge mistakes. They failed to put any laws on the books for advertising. They did not mandate testing. They did not allow their department to put potency limitations on the products. We learned from that, and we put all of that in our initiative. And when I worked on medical marijuana, we put it through the legislature. We put it in the legislators' medical marijuana package. And you know what? Our department, the BMMR in the state of Michigan, is doing an excellent job. They're walking into stores today and pulling anything that isn't childproof packaged right off of the shelves, and it gets destroyed. That's how rigorous this new program is working, and that's exactly how our initiative will work. And so this idea of just decriminalize it, let's see what happens, I think that is actually a terrible idea. I think it's extremely irresponsible, and I think that's bad for kids. Other than that, I wanted to touch on smoking in public. Yeah, that would be a terrible idea, which is why we made it illegal to smoke in public in Michigan. I'll pass it over to Sue.
I'll just touch on a couple things. I know they mentioned the increased hospitalizations. I'll tell you, if you look at the poison center data, the problem with it is it doesn't segregate the emissions associated with the synthetic cannabinoids that we talked about, the K2 and spice that are generated from prohibition. So I think it's not really fair to talk about describing it as some kind of public health epidemic when in fact that data isn't all just regular cannabis from the regulated market, but it also includes K2 and spice admissions to the ER. I also want to say, when he mentioned the billboards, and I don't approve of that either. I don't like them simplifying this argument, but I do believe that we have already significant survey data published in peer-reviewed medical journals. So I do dispute the word rhetoric, because there is actually legitimate scientific data showing that cannabis can be used as a substitute for more addictive drugs. And we have that data right here from the University of Michigan. We're preparing right now to publish a second round of the data that Dr. Latinas mentioned that was already published in the Journal of Pain. This is a more in-depth investigation looking at people substituting cannabis for opioids, benzodiazepines, all kinds of addictive sleep aids. And so I think that will be really helpful when you guys can look at it. But I agree, I don't like the propaganda that's happened, that's simplifying the data, but the data is there. And I want to just mention in the final, so I can pass it, that I have some reports that would challenge some of the data that they've suggested on the rate of motor vehicle accidents associated with cannabis. So I'd like us to all just think about the fact that we all can produce sources of data in published journals. I have data from very legitimate public health peer-reviewed journals showing that that states that legalize cannabis have not experienced significantly different traffic fatalities compared to other controls. So I would just say, as Luke mentioned, we can all produce data that supports our arguments. I would urge you to look at these reports that I have, and I'd be happy if you come up after. I'd love to give you my card or text you some of these reports so you can look at the entire breadth of research that's available. I've read the same reports they have, and I have come up with a different conclusion. And I would say that in terms of the increase in youth use, the Colorado Department of Health at the end of 2 years post-legalization said that there was no increase in youth use at 2 years. So we all have, we all can quote different data.
Okay, 30 seconds. I can go percentage this, percentage that, 96% of people make up statistics on the spot. I don't know what statistics mean, but they don't half the time. All I know is that I have a 15 and a 16-year-old son and a daughter that can get it illegally faster than I can get it legally, and that's if I've got a card and can go into a clinic. You made a really good point, 36 pounds for each person that legally has a card. That means there's a real large excess out there. And that's a considered figure. And I think to me personally, what it truly comes down to is with the stigma attached to the card, going to a clinic and getting a card, especially as a veteran or somebody who's trying to continue to serve, what it truly comes down to is the freedom to keep the government from telling me what I can or can't put into my body. And, thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to respond. So, I mean, here's the thing, okay? At the end of the day, if the proponents win this measure, they've got a world of profit, okay? There's an industry that's going to make a profit. If we win this, this measure, we get a pat on the back. I can look at my daughter in the eye one day and say, I fought for your future, but that's about it, okay? So there's a reason why you're being presented with a stark example, okay? They're trying to pin you into a corner and say, you only have one option. You only have one option, that's legalize it wholesale. I challenge that notion on its face. There are always options. There's always the opportunity for more research. My dad always used to tell me, son, if someone's trying to rush you to make a decision, you probably shouldn't make it. And that's what I've applied, and it's always worked out really well for me. So I think that's the right way to approach things here in Michigan. That's my thought. Now look, decriminalization, they're saying that's going to give life to the black market. Well, Colorado is the #1 exporter of black market weed in the country. And California now has 6 to 8 times the weed that they can consume as a state. And they just legalized at the beginning of this year. So the black market is exploding. The cartels are guarding illegal pot grows in our national forests in Colorado with AK-47s right now. And I heard that straight from the horse's mouth from narcotics officers in Colorado. Our Colorado State Attorney General said, and I quote, the cartels have not gone down, the black market has not gone away, legalization has not solved anything for the state of Colorado. That's Cynthia Kaufman, State Attorney General, okay? So that is the fact, that legalization does not solve, it is not the panacea, all right? And here's the thing with youth use, okay? Let's use some common sense here. We may have some mixed facts, but if you've got 1,000 pot shops in Colorado compared to 600 McDonald's and Starbucks combined, and my wife's high school, East High School, has 3 pot shops right on the same street as it, right in front of it, and I was there 4 weeks ago and there were kids hanging out on their bikes right in front of those pot shops. Do you think youth use is going to go up? Do you think that that's normalized? Of course it's normalized. Okay, let's not normalize this. There are better ways we can go. We can do this together. Thank you.
Obviously, this is a passionate issue, and my answer would not be to rush in to vote or yes or no. My issue would be to consider we need to take a position that says, not today. Not no, but not today. When we look at the American Medical Association, they're asking for the government to reschedule cannabis so we can have well-controlled trials. Because realistically, on the pro and the con side for the last 20 years, nobody's trusted each other. If you do a study, pro-cannabis says that's saying it's negative, so there's a conspiracy. And if it's positive, well, then you have the Attorney General speaking out and saying, well, it's contributing to delinquency of, toast and milkshakes. I don't know. But my position is not today. Adults, we've been taught to wait. We need to consider information and not be rushed. I don't like to be rushed about anything. Maybe that's why I'm a procrastinator and I'm late on everything. Isn't that the truth? So, and if we look at some of our cannabis-friendly natives in Sweden and Norway and Europe, there's an excellent study that was done in Sweden with army conscripts that were followed over time that were either exposed to cannabis as regular smokers or not smokers. And it showed that there was a deeper more significant rise 4 to 5 times in schizophrenia later in life. That's heavy cannabis, anything over 7 years. Now, that was done in the last 10 or 20 years when the potency was lower. So, not now. Wait, we need more information. And when it comes down to saying what our medical positions are, I don't know if I even trust my brothers and sisters as much. We are different generations, and we need to educate ourselves. I want to be able to say that we did the right thing for the patient, for our children, and for public health. And for me, the answer is not today. It's wait.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing you gotta ask. I mean, is this ballot initiative the appropriate and reflect responsible implementation? I mean, how many here have read the ballot initiative? Any? Really? Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Then you. Well, yeah, but I don't think you even had that time to read it though. But then, I mean, you know that they brought it down to 100 words for the ballot. Okay. We are an opt-out state. Does anybody know what an opt-out state means? Every community has to participate. It's going to cost the communities to have to bring a vote to their people to have it out of their communities. Okay?